Hello, game devs. Today I wanted to share with you my favorite tools as a solo game developer. Now, these are tools that you can use as a developer in a company as well. In fact, we'll talk about some that are specific to that. Now, I wanted to preface this by saying that when I started making games, tools were pretty much non-existent. At least the first system that I had was a Commodore 64. And if I wanted to write code, make a game, I was at a command prompt right when you turned it on, and that was my tool. I could type and put in code. Nowadays, though, things have gotten drastically easier. I mean, over the years, game engines started popping up and becoming available, and now they're actually free. So you can grab any engine that you want, or almost any engine you want, and start to build out games. So today we're going to talk about the specific tools that I use, including the engine, which is Unity. You probably already knew that if you're watching, though. And I'll tell you why I like the tools that I use on top of Unity, how they're helpful, and what ones probably give you a good idea of what things you might want to look for and see how they could help you with your workflow. So let's get started really quickly just by talking about game engines. Now, I mentioned that game engines weren't available in the 90s. They were kind of available to people who worked at a game company, and the engine was their internal. And it was being built up and modified for every game. But nowadays, game engines have become this like ubiquitous thing where anybody can download it, go start building something, and then publish and put out a game without having to pay some $1 million fee or anything. And I've worked with Unreal plenty. That was most of my professional career was in Unreal, and then Unity for the last 10 years or so. Been a big fan of it. I fell in love with it ever since the iPhone 1 came out, and we wanted to build an iPhone game. It was like they beat everybody to the market on that by like a year. So it was the obvious no-brainer choice. And they tend to be ahead of places on, or ahead of everybody else on new platform support too, which is always nice. And like I said, I just love the engine. So let's talk about the things that I use on top of Unity. What do I use that make it better? The first thing I wanted to mention is my code editor, because I think that that's probably the most important part. As a programmer, it's where you spend most of your time. At least it's where I spend most of my time. And the code editor that I use nowadays is JetBrains Writer. I used to be a giant fan of Visual Studio. I used Visual Studio all the way through the early 2000s up to 2010. I think I stopped using it in the mid 2010s as often. And then it was probably around 2019, a good friend of mine highly recommended that I try out Writer. He'd been using it and said, hey, it's much better. It's so fast, and it does really cool Unity integration stuff. And I put it off and put it off and put it off and put it off. Finally, I decided one day, okay, I'm going to give it 1 month. I'll try it for a month. If I hate it at the end of it, I'll just uninstall it and go back to something else. And I found like within 2 weeks, once I got used to the slightly different interface and the slightly different hotkeys, I was in love with it. It made things much easier, largely because of the speed. The debugging just worked, and the fact that it had really good Unity integration. So if I want to go find something by a layer, the layers are there. It's auto pop-up. It does that for just about everything, scenes and any other Unity-specific stuff. It shows you things that are serialized as serialized instead of errors, and it just kind of works. And now they've also been adding a lot of integration for new stuff. So one of the most recent announcements was Odin support for Writer, which is, I think, pretty awesome because Odin is my number 2, or I guess it would be number 3 tool right behind the engine in JetBrains Writer. And Odin, if you haven't seen it before, it's an editor extension for Unity. It really changes the way that the UI looks for when you're inspecting and modifying objects or building out custom editors. It makes it much easier to make a nice UI so that your designers can build things and manage data. You don't have to go in and handle all of the custom editor code. You just add attributes and you can get nice editors, and it's amazing for that kind of stuff. It also is the one with the button attribute. Number 1 feature there. So you just add a button by putting that in there and clicking on it. And there's a lot more to it, but like I said, JetBrains Writer has been adding integration with it so that they can find things like the tab groups, the different, what are these expressions that you can do in Odin. So in Odin, you can actually put expressions on attributes and then have them evaluate that expression. So it can actually detect that you're doing that there. And it looks at folders and all kinds of other cool stuff. So I think that using them together is nice. And it's nice that they're constantly working on adding these integrations. And Odin, number 3. Now, number 4 is this Vabs plugin that I found for the Unity editor. And this is one that I found recently. It came up as something somebody had recommended. And then it's now, I think it's in the flash deals in a couple of days in a 70% off deal with a bunch of other editor extensions that the same developer has. And so far, I've used 2 of them. The Vabs one, it's great. It makes it so that I can take any folder or any prefab and just turn it into a tab. I use this for my key prefabs in the game, things that I just want to be always accessible, and for important folders that hold stuff that I want to kind of edit the data on. Like I've got a folder of abilities. I can just click over to that. I don't have to go dig around and find it, or NPCs or anything else. So very handy tool. And with the flash deal, it's very cheap. I'll link that down below so you can check it out. Now, the last thing that I wanted to mention, actually, I take that back. Not the last thing. The next thing is AI stuff. So there are a couple of AI tools that I've been using over the last year. AI, I think 2023 is kind of the year of AI. So obviously lots of things that I tried out, and there are a couple that I've stuck with. The first is ChatGPT. First, I want to just call out that I don't use this nearly as much as I used to. This used to be something that I would play around with and throw stuff into for code all of the time, but it's become less and less useful as some competitors have come out. What the AI that I use most often nowadays for code stuff is actually Writer's AI that's built into the editor. I can ask it questions, and because it knows my full project context, it does a much better job of understanding what I want and giving me code that I feel like is better and cleaner. Now, the GitHub Copilot one also does that. And it does a pretty good job as well. So either one of those will work. I've actually got them both, and I just kind of switch back and forth. And I find that they're about equivalent, although I'm still enjoying the writer one just a little bit more, as well as the auto completion. Again, I go back and forth on those, but I'm curious, what do you, if you're still watching and still with me and you're using AI stuff, which AI do you use for code? Can you drop a comment down below? Just kind of get an idea of what everyone's using. I also, though, wanted to talk about art, because that's the other thing that I use AI for a lot. And my main tool for that, the primary one, is, of course, Midjourney. I don't search for artists by name or anything, but I will often find things like I want a warrior transparent cutout, so I can pop up a character there. I'll generate a couple and get something that looks decent, and then pop that in. Now, I can always go to the asset store, find something else that kind of matches. But when I do it from Midjourney, it feels a little bit more unique and fresh, and I'm not just using things that all kind of match this one asset pack. So I've found it very handy for that, and for UI elements, other things like that, big background screens, art that I wouldn't normally get something good for, and I would just use like a default placeholder or something. I can now go into Midjourney and just generate something cool. Of course, when I do that, I often go from there to Photoshop or GIMP, and then either do a little bit of cleanup, very, very minor cleanup, I'm a terrible artist, or doing some transparency cutouts. So take a character, cut out the background, and then pop them up, and then, hey, look at that, he's on a thumbnail. Now, as far as other tools go, a couple other important things that I do use regularly. One is Parsec. I've mentioned that before. It's free. Unity bought them. It allows you to remote desktop into another system and do basically like playing games or game development. You get full speed streaming, and it's totally free. It's pretty freaking amazing. I use it to do game dev from my laptop, remoted into this desktop here. Gives me all the power without the heat or any other issues. And the other thing is the source control. So I have been using Unity's source control. It's now called Unity version control. It was plastic before they acquired it, and it got renamed. And I found that it works great. So it works really well for Unity projects. I've never tried it for a non-Unity project. I would probably just default to Git for a non-Unity project. But for Unity ones, I found that the integration in the editor is pretty good. It's relatively solid. The external tool works well, and it keeps all my stuff nice and safe. So I've got source control and go back when I break things, which happens a lot. Anyway, that's all of my primary tools. There are probably a couple other things that I'm not remembering right now, but I'll do a video about those. I'm really, really, really curious, though. If you're still watching, please just let me know what tools you use, because all of these literally have come from recommendations from other people out there that are doing game development stuff. So it's other game devs recommending things. I would love to hear your recommendations. Drop them down below, and hit the thumbs up button when you're done. All right, see you in the next video. Bye. If you want to learn how to build multiplayer games and you're not sure how to start or how to get it done, go to game.courses and check out the Multiplayer Mastery course. It's my latest course on advanced game development where you'll learn how to build both a peer-to-peer racing game and a Diablo-style RPG with inventory, abilities, and spells, and a whole lot more. And if you're a new game developer or just getting into the industry, check out the Game Programmer course. It'll take you from zero experience to the point where you can build and deploy a fun local multiplayer game. You can enroll in both of them at game.courses today.